A rainy encounter that changed everything. David Harper shuffled through the rain-soaked streets, his hood pulled tightly over his head as the relentless drizzle soaked through his worn jacket. His daughter, Lily, clung to his hand, her small boots splashing in puddles as she giggled, oblivious to the storm both outside and within her father. At 6 years old, Lily didn't yet understand the weight of their situation, and David intended to keep it that way. The shopping cart he pushed held a meager collection of groceries, just enough to get through the week. A single loaf of bread, a half-gallon of milk, and a few canned goods rattled inside the cart as its wobbly wheel squeaked with every push. David glanced down at Lily, her bright pink raincoat standing out in stark contrast to the dreary surroundings. Her laughter, a rare melody, was the only bright spot in his day. "Daddy, look," she exclaimed, stomping into a particularly large puddle. Water splashed up, soaking the hem of David's jeans. "Careful, sweetheart," he said with a chuckle, though his smile was thin. He was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. Bills had piled up, his savings were nearly depleted, and an eviction notice now loomed like a dark cloud over their heads. As they rounded a corner, David noticed a sleek black car pulled off to the side of the road. The hood was up, steam rising into the chilly air. A woman in her early 30s stood next to it, drenched despite her fancy coat and broken umbrella. She fumbled with her phone, her frustration evident even from a distance. "Daddy, that lady needs help," Lily whispered, tugging on his sleeve. David hesitated, glancing at his watch. He was already running late for a job interview, an opportunity he couldn't afford to miss. But Lily's wide, innocent eyes pleaded with him. He sighed. "All right, let's go see if we can help." As they approached, the woman looked up, her face a mixture of relief and skepticism. "Need a hand?" David asked, his voice steady despite the storm in his own life. The woman hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I have a flat tire, and my phone isn't working in this weather. I'm supposed to be at a very important meeting." David knelt by the car, inspecting the tire. "I can fix this for you. It won't take long." The woman stared at him for a moment, then nodded again. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." As David worked, Lily stood nearby, her curiosity evident. "Daddy's really good at fixing things," she told the woman proudly. The woman smiled faintly, her frustration easing as she watched David work. Despite the rain soaking through his thin jacket, he worked quickly and efficiently. "All done," he said after a few minutes, standing and wiping his hands on a rag. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $50 bill. "Thank you so much. Please, take this." David shook his head, stepping back. "That's not necessary. I'm just glad I could help." The woman frowned, as if unused to having her money refused. "At least let me give you a ride. You're drenched, and it's the least I can do." David hesitated. He didn't want to impose, but he couldn't afford to lose more time walking through the rain. Finally, he nodded. "All right, thank you." Lily climbed into the back seat eagerly, her boots leaving faint wet marks on the plush carpet. As they drove, the woman introduced herself. "I'm Olivia Bennett," she said, her voice warm despite the chill in the air. "And you are?" "David Harper," he replied simply. When they reached the modest office building where his interview was scheduled, David thanked her and stepped out, Lily trailing behind him. "Good luck," Olivia said softly, watching as they disappeared into the building. Little did any of them know, this small act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change all their lives forever. David and Lily walked into the small office building, the warmth inside a sharp contrast to the cold, wet streets outside. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, illuminating the sparse waiting area. A young receptionist glanced up from her desk, her eyes briefly flickering to David's rain-soaked clothes and Lily's cheerful, damp form. "David Harper?" the receptionist asked, her voice polite but slightly uncertain as she noted the child by his side. "Yes, that's me," David said, his voice steady despite the tension he felt. He was acutely aware of how they must look: a man in a worn jacket and a little girl in a bright pink raincoat, her boots still leaving tiny puddles on the polished floor. The receptionist gestured to a row of chairs against the wall. "The interviewer is running a little late. Please have a seat." David nodded and led Lily to the chairs, sitting down with a tired sigh. He glanced at the clock on the wall, each passing minute feeling like an eternity. This interview was his last shot at steady work, and the weight of that reality pressed heavily on his shoulders. "Daddy," Lily whispered, leaning close to him. "Will you get the job?" David looked down at her, her wide, innocent eyes full of hope. He forced a smile, though his heart felt heavy. "I'll try my best, sweetheart." Lily grinned, seemingly satisfied with his answer, and swung her legs back and forth as she hummed a little tune. Her optimism was both a comfort and a reminder of why he couldn't afford to fail. The door to the inner offices opened, and a tall man in a sharp suit stepped out. His eyes swept the room before landing on David. "Mr. Harper." David stood, his grip on Lily's hand tightening for a brief moment. "That's me." The man's gaze flicked to Lily, then back to David. "You can leave your daughter here with the receptionist while we conduct the interview," he said, his tone neutral but firm. David hesitated, glancing at Lily. She gave him an encouraging smile. "It's okay, Daddy. I'll wait right here." The receptionist offered a kind smile. "Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on her." Reluctantly, David released Lily's hand and followed the man into the office. The room they entered was small but professional, with a large desk dominating the space. The man introduced himself as Mr. Calloway, the hiring manager, and gestured for David to take a seat. "Let's get started," Calloway said, his tone brisk. The interview began with the usual questions about David's experience and skills. David explained his background in automotive repair and maintenance, detailing the years he'd spent working at a local garage before it had shut down during the pandemic. He spoke with quiet conviction, emphasizing his ability to solve problems and work under pressure. As the interview progressed, Calloway's expression remained unreadable, and David couldn't tell if he was making a good impression or not. His nerves threatened to get the better of him, but he kept his focus, knowing that this was his chance to turn things around for himself and Lily. Finally, Calloway leaned back in his chair, his hand steepled in front of him. "Thank you, Mr. Harper. We'll be in touch." David nodded, swallowing his disappointment. The phrase "we'll be in touch" rarely meant good news. As he left the office and returned to the waiting area, Lily jumped up to greet him. "How did it go, Daddy?" David forced a smile, ruffling her hair. "It went fine, sweetheart." The walk home was quiet, the rain having subsided into a light drizzle. Lily chattered about her day at school, her words a welcome distraction from the uncertainty gnawing at David. When they reached their small apartment, David tucked Lily into bed, her soft snores filling the room as he sat at the kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice on the counter. The weight of failure pressed down on him, but he knew he couldn't give up. He had to keep trying, for Lily's sake if nothing else. 2 weeks later, the call came on a gray afternoon. David's heart sank as he listened to the polite but firm voice on the other end of the line. "We appreciate your time, Mr. Harper, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate." He thanked them, his tone calm, but as the call ended, despair engulfed him. He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice broke through his thoughts. David looked up to see her standing nearby, clutching one of her stuffed animals. "Are you okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. He forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little tired." She climbed onto his lap, wrapping her arms around him. "It's okay, Daddy. You always make things better." Her words, so simple yet so profound, sparked a flicker of determination in him. He couldn't afford to give in to despair. For Lily, he had to keep fighting. That evening, he began searching for other job opportunities, his resolve hardening with each rejection email he received. The eviction notice loomed like a dark cloud, but he refused to let it defeat him. A chance call. On a rainy afternoon, as David and Lily returned from the park, his phone rang. The unfamiliar number made his stomach churn with apprehension, but he answered it anyway. "Hello. Mr. Harper, this is Olivia Bennett," a warm, familiar voice said. David froze, his mind racing as he remembered the woman he had helped in the rain. "Oh, hi. How can I help you?" "I've been thinking about our encounter," Olivia said. "And I did a little research. I found out about your background in automotive repair, and I believe I may have an opportunity for you." Her words left David stunned. "You looked into me." Olivia laughed softly. "I hope you don't find it intrusive. I just couldn't forget how kind you were to me that day. I wanted to see if there was a way to repay you." David's heart raced as she explained the position, a full-time role as head of maintenance for her company, complete with a steady salary and benefits. She also mentioned a scholarship program that could secure Lily's education. It sounded too good to be true, but Olivia's sincerity left no room for doubt. "What do you say?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. David blinked back tears, nodding even though she couldn't see him. I don't know what to say. Thank you. This means everything to us." As he ended the call and looked at Lily, her curious eyes watching him, he pulled her into a tight hug. "Daddy, what happened?" she asked, her voice filled with excitement. David smiled, his voice trembling with emotion. "Everything's going to be okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." A door opens to the unknown. David stood outside the sleek office building downtown, its glass facade reflecting the gray skies above. It had been years since he had stepped foot into a place like this. His reflection in the polished glass caught his attention, and he adjusted his tie, a relic from a past life where he once believed he could climb the ladder of success. Lily tugged on his hand. "Daddy, why is this building so shiny? It looks like it's made of mirrors." David smiled, her excitement infectious. "It is shiny, isn't it? Now, be on your best behavior, okay?" She nodded solemnly, clutching her small backpack filled with crayons and a few of her favorite toys. As they walked through the sliding glass doors, the lobby opened before them, vast and modern, with marble floors that gleamed under soft, ambient lighting. A large chandelier hung above the reception desk, its crystals sparkling like diamonds. David's confidence faltered for a moment. Everything about this place screamed success, and he couldn't help but feel out of place. Behind the desk, a sharply dressed receptionist looked up, her professional smile softening as she noticed Lily. "Welcome. How can I help you?" "I'm David Harper," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I have an appointment with Olivia Bennett." The receptionist nodded and made a quick call. "Ms. Bennett will be down shortly. Please have a seat." David guided Lily to the plush chairs near the window, where she immediately began coloring in a small notebook. He couldn't help but feel grateful for her ability to find joy in the simplest things. A few minutes later, the sound of heels clicking against the marble floor drew his attention. Olivia Bennett appeared, her presence commanding yet approachable. She was dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair styled neatly, and her expression was warm as she approached them. "David," she greeted, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again." "Ms. Bennett," he replied, shaking her hand. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Please call me Olivia," she said with a smile before glancing down at Lily. "And you must be Lily. I've heard so much about you." Lily grinned. "Are you Daddy's new boss?" Olivia chuckled. "Something like that." After a brief exchange, Olivia led them through a set of glass doors and into a spacious conference room with a panoramic view of the city skyline. The room was modern yet inviting, with a long wooden table and comfortable leather chairs. "Have a seat," Olivia said, gesturing to the table. "We'll discuss the role and what it entails." As David settled in, Olivia began to outline the responsibilities of the position. The job was more than just fixing things. It was about overseeing a team, managing resources, and ensuring that the company's operations ran smoothly. It was a role that required leadership, something David hadn't exercised in years. "I know it's a lot to take in," Olivia said, noticing the overwhelmed look on his face. "But I have every confidence that you're capable of this. You have the skills, and I believe in giving people the chance to grow." David nodded, her words giving him a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. "I won't let you down," he said firmly. "Good," Olivia replied, her smile widening. "And as part of the offer, I've arranged for Lily to be enrolled in our company's scholarship program. It'll cover her education and provide additional resources to support her learning." David blinked, stunned by her generosity. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Olivia said simply. "That day in the rain, you reminded me of the kind of person I want to be." The first day, David's first day on the job, was a whirlwind. The maintenance team was a diverse group of individuals, some seasoned veterans and others fresh recruits. They were initially skeptical of their new manager, especially one who didn't have a flashy resume or formal leadership experience. "Is this guy really supposed to lead us?" one of the technicians muttered under his breath. David heard the comment but chose not to respond. Instead, he focused on proving himself through action. As the day unfolded, he rolled up his sleeves and got to work alongside the team, tackling repairs and addressing issues with the precision of someone who had spent years solving problems. By the end of the day, the team's attitude began to shift. They saw in David a leader who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, someone who understood their challenges and treated them with respect. That evening, as David returned home, he felt a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. Lily greeted him at the door, her face lighting up as she ran to hug him. "How was it, Daddy?" she asked eagerly. "It was good," David replied, lifting her into his arms. "Really good." The ripple effect. Over the following weeks, David settled into his new role, gaining the trust and respect of his team. He implemented small changes that made a big difference, streamlining workflows and improving efficiency. Olivia often stopped by to check in, her presence a constant source of encouragement. One afternoon, as David worked on a particularly tricky repair, Olivia approached him. "I wanted to let you know that Lily's scholarship has been finalized," she said. "She'll have access to some of the best educational resources available." David's gratitude was overwhelming. "I don't know how to repay you for this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've already repaid me," Olivia said. "The kindness you showed that day reminded me of what truly matters. This is my way of paying it forward." As the days turned into weeks, David's life began to stabilize. The steady paycheck allowed him to catch up on bills and stock their pantry with more than just the essentials. Lily's laughter grew brighter, her drawings more colorful, as the weight of uncertainty lifted from their lives. One evening, as they sat together at the dinner table, Lily asked a question that caught David off guard. "Daddy, why did Ms. Olivia help us?" David paused, considering his answer. "I think sometimes when you help someone, it inspires them to help others," he said. Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Like when I share my crayons at school." "Exactly," David said, smiling. Her innocence reminded him of the ripple effect that one act of kindness could have. It wasn't just about fixing a flat tire. It was about the chain of events it had set in motion, transforming their lives in ways he couldn't have imagined. As David tucked Lily into bed that night, he felt a sense of hope that had been absent for far too long. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face it. Rising to challenges. The sun had barely risen when David stepped into his office, the familiar scent of coffee wafting through the air. It had been a month since he started his new position as head of maintenance, and while he had already made strides in streamlining operations, he knew the real test was still ahead. As David reviewed the morning reports, Olivia walked in, her usual confident demeanor slightly clouded with concern. She placed a file on his desk and sat down across from him. "We've got a situation," she said, her tone serious. "One of our most critical clients, the Anderson Group, is threatening to terminate their contract. They've raised concerns about delays in our equipment maintenance and overall efficiency." David's stomach tightened. The Anderson Group was not just any client. They were a cornerstone of the company's revenue. Losing them would be catastrophic. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steady. "I need you to identify the bottlenecks in our system and fix them," Olivia said. "You're the only one I trust to handle this." David nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'll get started right away." The investigation. David wasted no time assembling his team. He outlined the stakes clearly, emphasizing the importance of everyone's role in resolving the issue. His approach was collaborative, inviting input from every member of the team. "Let's start by identifying where the delays are happening," he said. "Check every piece of machinery, review the maintenance logs, and report back anything unusual." As they worked, David took a hands-on approach, personally inspecting the most critical equipment. It wasn't long before they discovered a pattern. Several machines had been flagged for repairs multiple times, but the issues had never been fully resolved. "This looks like a supply chain issue," one technician suggested. "We're getting subpar replacement parts." David nodded, but he knew it was more than just the parts. The logs revealed inconsistencies in how the repairs were being handled. Some were rushed, while others were marked as complete without sufficient testing. He called for a meeting with the team to address the findings. "We're only as strong as our weakest link," David said, his tone firm but understanding. "We need to take accountability for these oversights and work together to fix them." The team responded with renewed determination, their respect for David growing as they saw his dedication and leadership in action. A long night. The days blurred into nights as David and his team worked tirelessly to address the issues. The pressure was immense, but David's calm demeanor kept morale high. He often stayed late, poring over data and double-checking repairs to ensure there were no loose ends. One night, as he reviewed a particularly complex system, Olivia walked into the workshop, a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. "You're still here?" she asked, handing him the cup. David took it gratefully, the warmth spreading through his fingers. "There's too much at stake to leave anything to chance," he said. Olivia leaned against the workbench, her gaze thoughtful. "You know, when I first offered you this job, I wasn't sure if you'd take it. But seeing you now, I couldn't have made a better choice." David looked up, surprised by her words. "Thank you," he said, his voice earnest. "But I couldn't have done any of this without your support." Olivia smiled, a hint of admiration in her eyes. "You're not just fixing machines, David. You're fixing this company." Her words stayed with him as he returned to his work, a newfound sense of purpose driving him forward. The client visit. A week later, the Anderson Group arrived for a site visit. David's team had managed to address every issue, and the systems were running more efficiently than ever. Still, the stakes were high, and the tension in the air was palpable. Olivia had asked David to join her in the meeting with the Anderson representatives, a decision that surprised him. "You've been at the heart of these improvements," she explained. "Your expertise and leadership are what turned this around. They need to hear that from you." David dressed in his best suit, his nerves threatening to get the better of him as he stepped into the sleek boardroom. The Anderson executives sat on one side of the long table, their expressions unreadable. Olivia introduced David, emphasizing his role in resolving the issues. When it was his turn to speak, David focused on the facts, detailing the changes they had implemented and the measurable improvements in efficiency. His sincerity and confidence shone through, gradually softening the executives' stern demeanor. By the end of the meeting, their tone had shifted. "We're impressed with the turnaround," one of the executives said. "You've earned back our confidence, for now." It wasn't a glowing endorsement, but it was enough. As the meeting concluded, Olivia turned to David, her smile filled with pride. You did it, she said softly. We did it, David corrected, his humility a reflection of the man he had become. A ripple of kindness. The success of the Anderson project marked a turning point for the company. David's leadership became a cornerstone of its operations, and his reputation grew among his colleagues. But it wasn't just his professional life that had transformed. At home, David noticed the changes in Lily as well. She was thriving in school, her confidence blossoming as she excelled in her studies. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the city lights, Lily turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy, do you think Miss Olivia is happy?" she asked. David chuckled, surprised by the question. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because she's always helping people," Lily said. "Maybe she needs someone to help her too." David didn't know how to respond to that, but her words lingered in his mind. Olivia had given him and Lily a second chance, but she rarely spoke about herself or her own struggles. As he tucked Lily into bed that night, David resolved to find a way to repay Olivia's kindness, not just with words but with actions. The challenges David had faced over the past few weeks had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but they had also reminded him of the strength he had within. With Olivia's support and his own determination, he had not only turned his life around, but also set an example for Lily of what resilience and kindness could achieve. And as he drifted off to sleep that night, he couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something greater. A bond strengthened. The morning sunlight streamed through the window of David's modest apartment, warming the small kitchen where he and Lily were having breakfast. Their usual routine had taken on a new lightness lately, a sense of stability that had been absent for years. Lily, munching on a slice of toast, was engrossed in a book about planets. "Daddy, do you think I could go to space one day?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with wonder. David smiled, brushing a crumb off her cheek. "If you work hard and dream big, I think you can do anything, Lily." Her grin widened, and she went back to her book, humming to herself. The phone buzzed on the counter, pulling David's attention. He wiped his hands and picked it up. The caller ID read Olivia Bennett. "Good morning, Olivia," David greeted, his voice steady but curious. "Good morning, David," Olivia replied, her tone professional, but with a hint of warmth. "I wanted to discuss something with you. Are you free to meet at the office later today?" David's heart skipped a beat. While their relationship had grown to be more than just professional, he couldn't help but wonder if there was something serious behind her request. "Of course. I'll be there," he said. "Great. I'll see you this afternoon," Olivia said before hanging up. A new offer. When David arrived at the office, he noticed a buzz of activity among the staff. People moved with purpose, their faces a mix of excitement and tension. Olivia was waiting for him in the conference room, standing by the window with a cup of tea in her hand. "David," she said, turning to him with a smile. "Thanks for coming." "What's going on?" he asked, his curiosity getting the better of him. Olivia gestured for him to take a seat and joined him at the table. "We've landed a major contract," she began, her tone calm but with an edge of excitement. "It's with Orion Technologies, a company that operates across the country. This could be transformative for us, but it's going to require a lot of coordination and leadership." David nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "What do you need from me?" "I want you to oversee the entire maintenance and logistics side of the project," Olivia said. "It's a step up from your current role, and it comes with more responsibility, but also more opportunity." David stared at her, his mind racing. This was more than he had ever expected when he started working for her company. He had been focused on proving himself in his current role, and now she was asking him to take on an even bigger challenge. "Why me?" he asked, his voice low. Olivia leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Because you've already shown me what you're capable of. You have the skills, the leadership, and the determination to make this happen. And most importantly, I trust you." Her words settled over him like a warm blanket, and he felt a swell of pride. He thought of Lily, of how far they had come, and how much this opportunity could mean for their future. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm. Olivia's smile widened. "I knew you would." The first test. The Orion Technologies project was nothing short of monumental. David spent the next few weeks immersed in planning and coordination, meeting with engineers, technicians, and suppliers to ensure every detail was accounted for. His days were long, often stretching into the night, but he didn't mind. One evening, as he reviewed blueprints at home, Lily climbed onto his lap, her face serious. "Daddy, are you working again?" David smiled, setting the papers aside. "Just for a little while, sweetheart. This project is very important." Lily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Is it going to make people happy?" "I hope so," David said, pulling her into a hug. "That's the goal." Her question lingered in his mind as he returned to his work. It reminded him that the impact of his efforts went beyond the office. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would benefit others. A crisis unfolds. Just as the project seemed to be gaining momentum, a sudden setback threatened to derail everything. One of the key suppliers for the project experienced a critical delay, leaving the team without essential parts just days before a major milestone. The news hit the office like a thunderclap, and the tension was palpable. David called an emergency meeting, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the anxiety in the room. "We're not going to let this stop us," he said, his voice firm. "We'll find a workaround. Let's start by identifying what we can do in-house to minimize the impact." His leadership rallied the team, and they began brainstorming solutions. David worked closely with the engineers, finding creative ways to repurpose existing materials and optimize workflows. Olivia watched from the sidelines, her admiration for David growing as she saw how he handled the crisis. By the end of the week, they had not only met the milestone but exceeded expectations. The client was impressed, and the setback became a story of resilience and ingenuity, a personal connection. One evening, as David and Olivia walked out of the office together, she turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "You know, when I first met you, I wasn't sure what to expect," she said, "but you've exceeded every expectation I've had." David chuckled, his hands in his pockets. "I didn't expect to end up here either. Life has a funny way of surprising us." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Olivia spoke again. "You've inspired me, David. Watching you rebuild your life, seeing your dedication to Lily, it's made me think about what really matters." David looked at her, surprised by her vulnerability. "You've given me and Lily a second chance. I don't know how to thank you for that." "You've already thanked me," Olivia said, her smile soft, "by showing me what true strength looks like." For the first time, David realized how much they had come to rely on each other, not just as colleagues, but as friends. It was a bond forged through shared challenges and mutual respect, and it was stronger than either of them had anticipated. A new chapter. As the Orion project reached its successful conclusion, David was promoted to Director of Operations, a role that put him at the forefront of the company's growth. The stability it brought allowed him to focus on giving Lily the life she deserved. One evening, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city, Lily looked up at him with a smile. "Daddy, are you happy now?" she asked, repeating the question she had asked months ago. David thought about everything they had been through, the struggles, the triumphs, and the people who had helped them along the way. "Yes, sweetheart," he said, pulling her close. "I'm happy, and it's all thanks to you." As the city lights twinkled in the distance, David felt a deep sense of gratitude. The kindness he had shown a stranger in the rain had come full circle, leading to a life he had never dared to dream of. The unexpected twist. Months passed, and David had settled into his new role as Director of Operations. His days were filled with meetings, managing teams, and overseeing the company's growth. The Orion Technologies project had cemented his reputation as a problem solver and a leader. The company's success had a ripple effect, boosting morale and inspiring everyone to give their best. For David, life finally felt stable, even fulfilling. Lily was thriving at her new school, her cheerful energy lighting up their small apartment. Yet, beneath the surface, David couldn't shake the feeling that life had one more challenge waiting for him. A sudden change. It began one morning when David noticed Olivia acting unusually distant. She was typically composed and approachable, but lately she had seemed preoccupied, her focus often drifting during meetings. David brushed it off at first, chalking it up to the usual stresses of running a growing company. But one evening, as he was leaving the office, he saw her sitting alone in the conference room. The lights were dim, and she was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. "Olivia," David called softly, stepping into the room. She turned to him, startled. "Oh, David, I didn't realize you were still here." "I was about to head out," he said, taking the seat across from her. "Are you okay? You've seemed distracted lately." Olivia hesitated, her hands fidgeting with a pen on the table. "I'm fine," she said quickly, but her tone betrayed her. "Olivia," David said gently, "you've been there for me when I needed help. Let me return the favor." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then she let out a sigh, her shoulders slumping. "I didn't want to burden anyone with this, but the company's in trouble." David's heart sank. "What do you mean? We've been doing well." "We were," Olivia said, "but a competitor has been undercutting our prices, and we've lost several key clients. Our revenue is shrinking faster than we can adapt, and if we don't turn things around soon." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. David leaned back, his mind racing. He had worked so hard to build a stable life for Lily, and the thought of losing it all again was unbearable. But more than that, he couldn't stand the idea of Olivia, who had given him so much, facing this burden alone. "What can I do to help?" he asked, his voice steady. Olivia looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and relief. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted, "but I know I can't do this without you." The plan. Over the next few weeks, David and Olivia worked tirelessly to devise a plan to save the company. They analyzed every aspect of the business, identifying inefficiencies and exploring new opportunities. David's experience in operations proved invaluable, and Olivia's leadership inspired the entire team to rally behind them. One evening, as they sat in the office poring over financial reports, Olivia leaned back in her chair and sighed. "David, do you ever wonder how things might have turned out if we hadn't met that day in the rain?" David chuckled. "All the time. It's funny how one small act can change everything." She smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "I've always believed in the power of kindness, but I never thought it would come back to me like this." David looked at her, sensing the weight she carried. "You've given me and Lily a second chance. Whatever happens, we'll figure this out together." For the first time in weeks, Olivia's smile reached her eyes. "Thank you, David. I don't know what I'd do without you." The unexpected ally. As they implemented their plan, David reached out to an old friend, Mark, who had experience in business development. Mark had been a mentor to David in his early career, and though they had lost touch, David hoped he could provide some guidance. Mark agreed to meet with David and Olivia, and his insights proved invaluable. He suggested a partnership with a smaller but rapidly growing tech company that specialized in innovative solutions. The partnership would not only help stabilize their revenue, but also position them as leaders in a new market. The idea was risky, but Olivia and David knew it was their best shot. They presented the proposal to the board, and after a tense meeting, the board approved it. A moment of crisis. Just as things seemed to be turning around, an unexpected crisis struck. A cyber attack targeted their systems, disrupting operations and threatening their new partnership. The timing couldn't have been worse, and the team was thrown into chaos. David sprang into action, coordinating with the IT department to contain the breach. His calm demeanor and quick thinking kept the situation from spiraling out of control, but it was a grueling process that tested everyone's limits. Olivia, who had always been the pillar of strength, finally broke down. Late one night, as they worked side by side in the office, she buried her face in her hands. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice shaking. David placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone," he said gently. "We'll get through this together." Her shoulders trembled, and for the first time, she let herself lean on him. It was a moment of vulnerability that deepened their bond, a reminder that even the strongest people need support sometimes. The turning point. With the cyber attack contained and the partnership secured, the company began to stabilize. The team's resilience paid off, and their efforts were recognized by clients and competitors alike. The new partnership brought in a wave of opportunities, and Olivia's leadership was praised as visionary. David, now more than ever, felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't just building a career. He was part of something bigger, a community that valued hard work and compassion. A quiet victory. One evening, as David walked home with Lily, she looked up at him with her usual curiosity. "Daddy, are you and Ms. Olivia going to save the company?" David smiled, lifting her onto his shoulders. "We already are, sweetheart." Lily giggled, her laughter echoing through the quiet streets. For David, it was a sound that symbolized everything they had fought for, a future filled with hope and possibility. When they reached their apartment, David found a handwritten note slipped under the door. It was from Olivia. "David, I don't think I'll ever be able to put into words how much your support has meant to me. You've reminded me of why I started this company in the first place, to make a difference. Thank you for being my partner in every sense of the word. Olivia." David folded the note carefully, his heart full. The challenges they had faced had tested them in ways he couldn't have imagined, but they had emerged stronger, both as individuals and as a team. As he tucked Lily into bed that night, he thought about how far they had come. The rain-soaked encounter that had brought Olivia into their lives had been a turning point, but it was the choices they had made since then that had defined their journey. And as he turned off the light and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, David knew that this was just the beginning of something even greater, a future rewritten. The golden rays of dawn illuminated the bustling city as David made his way to the office. The world outside was alive with the hum of progress, and for the first time in years, David felt a sense of true belonging. The journey had been arduous, but the rewards were beginning to show in ways he had never imagined. Lily had started drawing again, not just whimsical pictures of suns and stick figures, but detailed, colorful depictions of the world around her. That morning, she'd handed David a new drawing, a family portrait. It showed herself, David, and Olivia standing under a bright sun, smiling. The sight had warmed his heart, but it also left him pondering the deeper connection that had grown between him and Olivia. A new opportunity. When David reached the office, Olivia was already waiting in the conference room, a large blueprint spread across the table. Her usual sharp attire was complemented by a spark of excitement in her eyes. "David, you're just in time," she said, motioning for him to join her. He leaned over the table, studying the plans. "What's this?" "This," Olivia said, tapping the blueprint, "is our next big project. A sustainability initiative focused on clean energy and community development. We're partnering with local organizations to create something that benefits not just businesses, but people." David nodded, impressed. "This is ambitious, even for you." Olivia smiled. "Ambitious is what we do best." She hesitated for a moment, then added, "I want you to lead this initiative with me. It's going to take everything we've got, but if we pull it off, it'll redefine what this company stands for." David stared at her, the weight of her trust sinking in. "Why me?" "Because you see things differently," Olivia said. "You've lived through struggles that most people can't imagine, and you know what it means to make a difference. That perspective is exactly what we need." He considered her words, his mind flashing back to all the challenges they had faced together. This project wasn't just about business. It was about creating a legacy. "I'm in," he said. his voice firm. "The journey begins." Over the next few months, David and Olivia poured their energy into the project. It wasn't just about building infrastructure, it was about building relationships. They visited community centers, spoke with local leaders, and held town hall meetings to understand the needs of the people they aimed to serve. David found himself thriving in this new role. His ability to connect with people on a personal level made him an invaluable asset, and Olivia often relied on his insights to guide their decisions. One evening, as they walked through a neighborhood where the first solar panels were being installed, Olivia turned to David with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't stopped to help me that day in the rain?" she asked. David chuckled, the memory vivid in his mind. "All the time. It's funny how one small decision can change everything." She nodded, her gaze distant. "I was so focused on my meeting that day, so wrapped up in my own problems. And then you came along, and everything shifted." David looked at her, sensing the vulnerability in her words. "You've done more for me and Lily than I could ever repay. If anyone's made a difference, it's you." Olivia smiled, a rare softness in her expression. "Maybe we've both made a difference for each other. A new beginning." The project's success exceeded everyone's expectations. The Clean Energy Initiative became a model for other companies, and David's leadership was widely recognized. His story of resilience, kindness, and second chances resonated with people far beyond the company's walls. At home, Lily continued to flourish. Her drawings became more intricate, and her teachers praised her creativity and determination. She often talked about the future, dreaming of becoming an artist or a scientist, or both. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony, Lily turned to David with a thoughtful expression. "Daddy, do you think Ms. Olivia will ever have a family like ours?" she asked. David was taken aback. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Lily shrugged. "She's always so nice, and she works so hard. I think she deserves to be happy too." David didn't know how to respond. Over the past year, his bond with Olivia had grown deeper than he had ever expected. They weren't just colleagues. They were partners, in every sense of the word. But he hadn't allowed himself to think beyond that. The unexpected proposal. A week later, Olivia invited David and Lily to her home for dinner. It was the first time they had been to her house, a cozy but elegant space filled with personal touches, photos, books, and artwork that revealed a side of Olivia they hadn't seen before. As they sat around the table, laughter filled the air. Lily was telling Olivia about her latest school project, her enthusiasm lighting up the room. After dinner, as Lily played with Olivia's dog in the living room, Olivia turned to David. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about," she said, her tone unusually serious. David's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Olivia took a deep breath. "This past year has been transformative. Not just for the company, but for me personally. And a big part of that is because of you." David stared at her, unsure of where this was going. "I spent so much of my life focused on my career, building this company, that I forgot what it means to really connect with people," Olivia continued. "But you and Lily, you've reminded me of what matters." She paused, her eyes searching his. "I want us to keep building something together, David, not just as colleagues, but as a family." David was stunned. He had never imagined that their partnership could evolve into something more, but as he looked into her eyes, he realized that he felt the same way. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Olivia said, her smile soft but hopeful. David nodded, a smile breaking across his face. Yes, a future rewritten. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. David and Olivia's relationship blossomed, and they found a balance between their professional and personal lives. For Lily, the changes were seamless. She adored Olivia, and the feeling was mutual. Together, they became a family, supporting each other through life's challenges and celebrating each other's successes. The Clean Energy Initiative continued to thrive, And David and Olivia's story became a symbol of hope and resilience for everyone around them. One evening, as they sat on their balcony watching the sunset, lightly snuggled between them, David looked at Olivia and smiled. "Who would have thought that a flat tire in the rain would lead to all this?" he said. Olivia laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, David felt a deep sense of gratitude. The road had been long and filled with hardships, but every step had led him to this moment, a life filled with love, purpose, and the promise of a brighter future.